being novelty, being the novelty and you're into it, I'm reading everything and adding my own interpretations and adding other people's interpretations. I also got NSCA certified a couple of times in the intervening years, so I had a lot of influences, a lot of the conventional wisdom. And in 1996, that was the best shape I was ever in and ever since. Notice my picture is far away from Menser's. But that was as good as I could do, right? And that was good enough for me. Now, unfortunately, I can't really look that way anymore because I decided to rupture my right biceps and triceps. So the triceps it was an accident. I was skating, I fell. But the biceps, I was just doing a slow curl, and I felt a little, and then when I looked at my arm, there was like a black and blue golf ball there. So that got my attention, especially considering that I thought I knew all of this stuff about exercise, and this was 1998, so that means I had been, at that point, it was 25 years that I'd been working out and thinking I was reading all this stuff. Then the other thing that got my attention was after everything healed, in some exercises, I didn't lose any strength whatsoever. And in other exercises, I couldn't even get into position. The shoulder was unstable, I couldn't hold the position. So I put all the NSCA stuff, all the muscle magazines, all the HIIT stuff aside, and I went to friends of mine's, physical therapist friends of mine's, anatomy and biomechanics books. These two being especially useful, Brunstrom's Clinical Kinesiology and Vogel's Prime Mover. And what I found there was very different than what I had found in the muscle media. So for my own self, I rearranged and rethought how I exercise, which then led to moment arm exercise, congruent exercise, videos, etc. So, and what I did was, the biomechanics textbooks are very, very dense, and they're really not written with lifting heavy things in mind. So what I settled on was this sort of process, right? I would start with something like a barbell curl, if you've seen the curl video. And then I would try to figure out what the issues were biomechanically, and then either tweak it or use an alternative exercise or just discard the idea completely. Side note, if I had kind of learned over the last 20 years instead of when I did, this would have been much more difficult because of this emphasis on whole body movements, where there's just too many moving parts. You really can't, I don't really think you can get as precise a handle. So for instance, if you're looking at curls, it's elbow flexion, pretty cut and dry. When they get into these whole body movements, much more difficult. And again, how I interpreted biomechanics was how the bones and muscles of the spine handle load, how the shapes and connections of the joints affect movement. They're not all 90 degrees and they're not all hinges. And then how to apply and resist force, specifically with lifting weights for exercise in mind. And as I heard Schuyler say, the 30,000 square foot view became, and if you just take this torque word, put it over here, if you have biomechanics at one end and exercise at the other end, and you break it down into the joints, the spine and the curves of the spine is what's important. The shoulder moving overhead is important. The knee and the elbow is flexing, extending, and with the elbow, the wrist and the elbow, how they rotate. On the muscles, you break them down to deep and superficial muscles. The deep muscles are responsible for posture. The superficial muscles are responsible for torque. And you either maintain posture through stabilization, you develop the torque through resistance training, and when you put it all together, you end up with exercise. So now, as we're heading into the gym, I frequently have people say, oh, I did a kettlebell class, I did this exercise. That's a great exercise, right? And if you pick apart, well, what's a great exercise? What makes it a great exercise? Usually it's somewhere over here. You get a good pump, you got a good burn. I got sore the next day, I sweat, my breathing, my heart rate. Much of which boils down to feel. It feels like a good exercise. It must be a good exercise. And I agree with that. I want that also, but I want to incorporate this stuff at the same time. Safe joint motion, challenge the muscles appropriately, and not having a sticking point. So let's go right into the actual practical stuff here. Who thinks the left side is better form? Quick show of hands versus the right. Put your left hand up for the left, right hand up for your right. Okay, I can't count. I used to think this was better form, ass to the ground squats. There's certainly enough written support for it, but I've come to think this is better. Okay, this is the bottom position if I were at a barbell squat, mainly because of where the lumbar curve is. So obviously with the shirts it's hard to say, but this curve is still somewhat intact. The lumbar curve is towards the belly, and this curve is obviously, with your ass to the ground, rounded the wrong way. Now it gets tedious. Sorry. Now, here's why. Lumbar spine, the lumbar curve, thoracic, cervical. When the now James, correct me if I'm wrong, but since the vertebrae are irregularly shaped, they're not Legos, they're not squared off Legos. Since they're irregularly shaped, when they're stacked on top of each other, there's a curve in the spine. Thank you. When there's a curve in the spine, the pressure on the discs is even. They're not bulging, they're not twisted, it's flat. Thank you. Now, what happens when you exaggerate a curve in the spine, when you reverse a curve in the spine? If you do that, if you exaggerate the curve or reverse the curve, the disc deforms a bit, which in itself is fine. But do it over a lifetime, do it through manual labor, do it through repetitive motion, do it through exercise, and eventually you come up to either a disc herniation, ruptured disc, compressing the nerves. A whole lot of things can go wrong with the spine. Thank you. So getting back to this one, let's assume I'm not lying and the lumbar curve is folded the wrong way, right? You can get away with this, and if you're not squatting with the barbell, as James and I were doing earlier, it does help stretch your lower back, it does feel like some relief. But again, don't forget in exercise, we're putting a bar on it, and we're doing multiple repetitions, and we're pushing hard on it, and we're hopefully doing this for years. So, to my eye, combining that with the rest of life's wear and tear is only going to accelerate the wear and tear on your disc in this form. In this form, you're at least managing what you can manage. You still might have a problem, but you're not really overtly running into it. Some other relevant anatomy of the spine. So one argument you get is, well, if you put the spine in that position, the muscles around the spine will eventually get strong enough, right? The only problem is the layers of muscles around the spine are much smaller than the glutes and the quads. And if you notice, they're also very short. They don't cover as much of a distance as the glutes and the quads cover. So their role is to hold the curve in the spine. So you can easily overpower those muscles with a normal squatting load, for instance. And then as you get more superficial, the muscles get a bit longer, okay? But ultimately, if you're at that rock bottom position in the squat, the first thing your muscles try to do is get the curve back in your spine. And given the relative size of them, that's where you run the chance of them straining, going into a spasm, leading to whatever other complications come out of it. So, very common guidelines for the spine, right? Don't load in flexion. In other words, when you pick something up, don't slouch into it. Turn, don't twist, right? You never see a baseball player lock his legs in place and try to hit this way. It's a turn. The hips turn, the body follows. A boxer, a tennis player. The reason why you turn, you don't twist is
exercise, the best manuals and exercise ever written. So please help me welcome to the stage, Bill DeSimone.
You'd be a champion, but it would kill you. Would you take it? And methodology aside, and whatever other quibbles people had aside, a lot of people said yes. So that type of thinking, it's not just CrossFit. It's been around for a while. A boxer, a tennis player. The reason why you turn, you don't twist is the disc is between the vertebrae. If you twist the vertebrae, it's like wringing out a dish towel. And again, it allows it, but it's not the best thing for it over time. An office are a certain height. You can pretty much do it with all hip and quad action and not make it more complicated. Also from the 2000 NSCA textbook. Same exercise, different parts of the book, okay? And neither part of the book identified one of these as the wrong way to do it or a risky way to do it. Perfect, but if you aim for perfect, then the natural, if you fall short, you still have a lot of margin of error.